So it's recording now. And if I start the webinar, everyone can join now, right? You ready for me to start?
I believe so. Yep, go right ahead.
Okay.
And I'll just sit here awkwardly as people stream in.
Okay, it started. There's one attendee so far.
Hello, people starting to stream in. We're gonna have a few minutes just open here while everyone kind of makes their way in, and we'll get going at 10 o'clock, if not maybe a minute or two afterwards. Just give people time to get on. Even now, people are still figuring out how to use Zoom and web conferencing software, so we'll make sure that people have enough time to get in and get settled. Thanks everyone for joining a little bit early. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to kind of stream in before we get going here. Okay, we are at 10 o'clock now, and I'm looking at the number of attendees. We should have a few more people joining, so I'm just going to give it another couple minutes and we'll get going with our program here. Thanks everyone for getting on time. Okay, we're a couple minutes past 10 now, so I think we'll go ahead and get started with the program. So thanks everyone for hopping on. This is part of a series that we've been hosting for quite some time now, and have started doing these online with a mind towards putting up a library of some of our workshops that we host online that are accessible at all times. And so I guess I'll just jump right in. My name is Elliot Whitehurst. I work for the County of Sonoma in the Energy and Sustainability Division. And this is our workshop on solar power and battery backup basics. I'm actually joined by my colleague Dora Estrada, who is on the line, and she is monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those into the chat, and she will get those back to me at the end of the program, so we can go over them and make sure all of our points are covered. After the presentation, a link to the recording of this will be sent out to everyone that's attending. So there's no need to take notes. You'll be able to access this again in the future. For me, I know I mentioned my name is Elliot Whitehurst, but I'm hosting this because I do have a background in the solar industry. I worked for just under 10 years for a smallish contractor in Marin before I came to work for the County of Sonoma just under 6 years ago. And so in addition to doing these workshops, I also hold consultations, one-on-one solar consultations that are free of charge. As county employees, we're not able to give any recommendations or show any bias. So really just informational consultations that any of you are welcome to reach out and see if we can line one up for you, so we can get you a little bit more comfortable with the process beyond what you'll learn here today. So that's the sound of that car, an electric vehicle coming in. I'm going to talk a little bit about our division before we get going on the solar stuff, because not a lot of people understand that the County of Sonoma actually has an energy and sustainability division. And if they do, they don't really realize the number of services that we offer for the community. Just a little bit of background is that this division was originally created in 2006 to address internal county energy use in order to mitigate climate change through greenhouse gas reduction. In 2009, our first community-facing program was introduced, which is the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program, or SCIPE. This is the first and longest running residential PACE program, and PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. So this is essentially a financing program that we can talk about it a little bit if anyone's interested. But the program basically allowed for property owners to finance energy and water savings improvements as a tool in reducing greenhouse gases. It's since been expanded to include wildfire safety and seismic strengthening improvements as well. But as I mentioned, we'll talk about that just a little bit more as we get down the road here. So since then, we've offered a number of services, obviously, as I mentioned, consultation services, these workshops. We also have a number of programs that face public buildings, schools, and all that sort of stuff, as are outlined here. So our primary focus is buildings and behaviors. We generally assist customers through a variety of different services, working with cities, towns, special districts, schools, businesses, and residents to increase energy efficiency in their buildings through audits, energy retrofit projects, rebates, financing, all kinds of stuff. We offer the county's PACE program, as I mentioned. It's financing to property owners, which now includes financing for energy, water, solar, battery backup, wildfire safety, seismic strengthening. And this is for retrofits and for new construction on your buildings. Our consultation services, as I mentioned, are no cost, impartial information, primarily to educate community members so they can make informed decisions related to building improvements, and offer project planning services to help identify resources such as incentives, rebates, and financing to get projects done. We also host a number of these workshops. There are many more beyond just this one. Moving on, we can actually get into the workshop itself. Let's see. So, interesting. I'm seeing some weird stuff on my screen, so I apologize. Solar power and battery backup basics. Where we can start is at the most basic of basics. What we see here is the type of solar electric system that most of us are somewhat familiar with. This is what's known as a grid-tied system. Probably 95% of the solar electric systems installed in Sonoma County are what are known as grid-tied systems. Basically, what that's stating is that you're still a PG&E customer, you're still a Sonoma Clean Power customer if you started as one. And the basic function of this solar electric system is to, just as we're using kilowatt hours in our home, the solar electric system is producing kilowatt hours, and through various hardware is exporting those kilowatt hours to the grid. PG&E is keeping track of how many kilowatt hours you're using and how many you're producing, and you are billed or credited for those kilowatt hours accordingly. So as far as the physical makeup of a solar electric system, this is what we're looking at here. You see people's panels up on their roof, and that is one of the main components of a solar electric system. That is what's generating the electricity. And what those panels are producing is DC electricity, or direct current electricity. The grid operates on AC electricity, or alternating current electricity. So something needs to be taking that DC electricity, turning it to AC so that it can be exported to the grid. That conversion happens at the inverter level, number two here. And so once that is turned to AC, it's sent through your service panel and through PG&E's meter at number 4 there and exported to the grid. So this is really how they're keeping track of what you're using, what you're producing, and it is doing this in real time. And as some of you may know, time of use rate structures are what we are moving towards, and so it's keeping track of the time of day that you're producing these kilowatt hours and crediting you accordingly. So net energy metering, what is NEM? How does it help me? So net energy metering is at the core of it a very simple concept, but it can be broken down to be much more complicated, like so many things. Net energy metering, or NEM, as I mentioned, is the program through which PG&E is keeping track of what you're producing and what you're using, and making sure that you're billed accordingly. As I mentioned, even if you're a Sonoma Clean Power customer, you are still a PG&E customer. Sonoma Clean Power, you are paying for the generation of electricity, whereas PG&E owns the grid, and they are maintaining the grid. So you're actually paying them for the transmission of electricity. How NEM breaks down between the two is an important point and something to be aware of. When you go solar, as far as PG&E is concerned, you begin NEM on the 1st or the 15th of the month, whichever is closest to when you interconnect your system. And when I say interconnect, that is to say the system is built out, it's been inspected, and all of the paperwork has been filed with PG&E to say, this is the solar electric system that we've built. Please start billing us and crediting us for what the solar electric system is doing. So your time of interconnection starts what is known as the true-up period. Since electricity is used on a very seasonal cycle, and electricity is produced by a solar electric system on a very seasonal cycle, PG&E gives you an entire year to make your way through to produce electricity and build up credits, and then use that electricity during the time of the year where you're generally using more than you're producing, and work your way through those credits to where at the end of the year, hopefully, you will have offset your bill by producing enough electricity. So that is, for PG&E's purposes, dependent on whenever your system gets interconnected. That will effectively start your true-up period, which is what that annual period is known as. Through Sonoma Clean Power, you also have a true-up period there. However, for all of their customers, the true-up period starts and ends at the exact same time, and that is April 1st. This leaves those of us installing a solar electric system in the wintertime in a bit of a tough situation right at the start of our experience with the solar electric system, because they will actually bill you if you use more than you produce and don't have the credits to take care of it. So April 1st is the time of the year where you really should start to produce a lot more than you're using, thus allowing you to build up some credits and make your way back around to April 1st and work your way through those credits. This difference in the true-up period really should only affect people who are interconnecting at this very time of the year, and really only for those first few months. Once you make your way through that, it should all get onto that rotating cycle. One thing to be aware of is that if you do in fact overproduce electricity, you will be paid for that overproduction, but it's at a very minimal rate. If you're only a PG&E customer, you're going to get paid the wholesale rate for electricity, which, as you can see here, has traditionally been between 3 and 4 cents per kilowatt hour. If you are a Sonoma Clean Power customer, since you're paying them for generation, and that's how that system works out, they would actually be the ones to pay you for overproduction, your overgeneration. And while they do pay you at a rate that is twice that of PG&E, it still works out to like 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour, which on the current time of use rate structure, you're talking about the cheapest electricity is at about 29 cents per kilowatt hour versus the peak, the more expensive, being at about 31 cents per kilowatt hour as your total cost for that kilowatt hour. So 3 to 7 cents per kilowatt hour is not totally commensurate with the retail rate that you're paying. So just be aware of that. Overproducing and sizing a system to overproduce doesn't really pay if you get to the end of the year and you've intentionally really overproduce. So that's just something to be aware of. Into some of the commonly asked questions for solar electric systems, and some questions that you should be asking yourself. It's really good to understand what your driving factors are, whether those are environmental or financial or both. As time has gone on, those of us that may have been exploring solar electric systems 5 or 10 years ago, you would have gotten the line of like, well, if your bill isn't this much, then it really doesn't make sense for you. we really have kind of hit a point where a solar electric system really does make sense for practically everyone. Those of us that are really, really low users, it's really just that the return on investment is going to be a little bit longer than for those of us that are higher users. But it is pushing us into, one of those. It's one of those few investments that is financially very feasible, even for a lot of people to be purchasing outright at this point, if not financing, while still being really, really beneficial to the environment. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. The second one, do I have the usage to justify it? I put on here the number of $75 per month, and this is just for the electric portion of your bill. Something to be aware of is that a really good looking return on investment right now is somewhere in like the 6-year range. And if you're talking about return on investment, that is to assume that you are actually making an outright purchase for the solar electric system, and you're looking at, how it's going to pay back, how quickly it'll pay back. If you're talking about financing, the conversation is different. But if you're just purchasing outright, generally speaking, a good return on investment is about 6 years right now. If you have a bill that's up over $75 per month, if you're getting up closer to, 100, 200, the higher that bill, the quicker the return on investment for this. But 6 years is a pretty darn good return on investment as it is right now. And this last one kind of dovetails into that. Is it feasible? Are you looking at cash purchase, financing, or leasing? Any way that you're looking at going solar, it will save you money, especially when you're looking at it in the long term. And then, do you have the proper location and exposure for a solar electric system? A lot of us have really good solar access. A lot of homes with wide open roof spaces that are kind of facing south or west or even southeast. The only people in Sonoma County that do have some consistent struggles are those that are living more in West County, where there are a lot of trees. You really obviously need to have solar access in order to have a solar electric system that's going to produce kilowatt hours. So what are some of the things you need to consider? A south, southwest, or western orientation is generally going to be best. This is because of the way that PG&E has their time of use rate structures set up, which we all have to go onto a time of use rate structure when we go solar. Obvious things like avoiding obstructions. If you have really, really tall trees, that could be an issue. If you have vents that are on the roof that are going to be shading any part of that system, that could be an issue. Chimneys and that sort of stuff. These are some considerations when you're really, if you're actually in the build of a structure, or a lot of people are re-roofing at the same time that they're going solar, which may allow you the opportunity to move vents and that sort of stuff. Also consider how much space you have in your main service panel, and that could be something that you end up having to do work on is the service panel itself, if it's not really set up to accept solar, or if you have an older service that hasn't been upgraded in a long time, it may be some work that you have to do. Moving on, what happens when the power goes out? This is the face you'll see in the mirror when the power goes out. Generally speaking, for those that are looking at a grid-tied system, unless you're looking at some pretty specialized hardware that not a lot of people are installing at this point, when the power goes out, you will lose power in your home. Even if you have a solar electric system and you're in the middle of the day and it is producing, this is a function of one of PG&E's safety rules. It's what's known as Rule 21, which basically dictates how solar electric systems can be installed, and all of the technical safety mitigation issues. Rule 21 states that if the power goes out, that solar electric system needs to turn itself off, essentially to protect their line workers. who are going to come out and try and fix those lines, they need to ensure that it's not being backfed. Of course, there are ways to ensure that you do have power when the power goes out, such as battery backup. Very popular topic right now, especially with all the public safety power shutdowns that we've been dealing with in our county. So understandable that people are really interested in battery backup. Until very recently, looking at batteries and considering the cases in which you would really need a battery, we were looking at how many waking hours over the course of 1 year were we really dealing with power being out if we were, closer to some of our urban areas, 1 or 2 hours out of the year, where you might be looking at having power outages and wanting to have battery backup or a generator. Again, for those like in West County, definitely some more power outages, or those of us that are more rural, some more reliable power outages, and you may be really seriously considering battery backup. So some things to kind of ask yourself when you're looking at battery backup for a number of reasons. How often is your power going out? And because of the way that batteries work, you may be considering what your critical loads are in your home. The way that batteries are working right now, while the technology has improved over the last few years to be using lithium-based batteries, they are still quite expensive. And in a lot of cases, a single battery unit, if we're talking about like a Tesla Powerwall sort of unit, in a lot of cases, that's not taking care of the entire load in most people's homes. If you're kind of in the bucket of the average electricity user in our county, you're probably looking at installing a couple of battery units if you really want for the case to be when the power goes out, you just don't even know it. Otherwise, what you're looking at is the critical loads in your home. Your refrigerator, if you have a chest freezer in your garage, you probably are looking at some lights and some plug loads, so you can plug in your laptop or your phone and keep it charged up, your modem and router, whatever the case may be. Those are the considerations that you're going to be looking at if you're considering installing a battery. Considering alternatives, we are the Energy and Sustainability Division, so we would absolutely advocate for the installation of batteries, lithium-based batteries, before looking at natural gas generators. But of course, those are an option. And are there any opportunity costs to be avoided? So if we're looking at, refrigerators and freezers, what is the cost of losing the stock of those things? Could be a few $100 or more. Generally speaking, the cost behind the installation of a single battery unit like your Tesla Powerwall, since we have a financing program in-house, what we're seeing is that tends to fall between like the $10,000 to $15,000 range, turnkey for a single battery unit. There are a lot, traditionally batteries have been used as a means of backing up your power. However, the way that batteries are starting to be utilized is that they can actually be cycled daily. This cuts into the lifespan of your battery system, the longevity of it. However, as PG&E's rates continue to evolve, there is some consensus that utilizing a battery to charge up using a solar electric system during the off-peak time of the day, so that you can draw from that battery during the peak time of the day, is going to be very worthwhile as an investment. And that will be informed as time goes on and we see what happens with PG&E's rate structures. In terms of configuration for batteries, there are a lot of different configurations that you might be looking at depending on the equipment that you're installing. They can be AC, they can be DC coupled, they can land really in a lot of different places in the wiring of your system. So this is just to say, if you're considering batteries, but not necessarily considering them right now, and you decide to move forward with installing a solar electric system, it's important to understand that there are a lot of different options, and it may be a conversation that you want to have with your contractor right up front. Understand that if you do end up going solar and want to install a battery further down the road, if you decide to use a different installer for that battery backup system in the future, there's a good chance that may actually void your workmanship warranty given to you by the installer for the solar electric system. So there's a very good chance that you'll want to use the same installer to install the battery down the road that you used to install the solar electric system for warranty purposes. That's just something to be aware of, and that is a conversation that I've had with a number of contractors. They have definitely said that that is something that they want for people to be aware of. And then back to just some of those considerations for what critical loads are. Obviously, medical devices, you need for those things to be up and running. Refrigerators, freezers, garage doors, and electric gates were a big issue in some of our past emergency situations with the fires. Over the course of the last 4 years. So yeah, there are definitely things to consider that we would call critical and that you would want to be on that backup. Excuse me. Federal tax credit. Everyone freaks out. You know what? This is the first time in the last X number of years that I can say, don't freak out. Don't be this kid. That kid can go away. At the end of last year, and this has been fully ratified, the federal tax credit for renewable energy systems was actually extended, kind of out of nowhere. This was completely unexpected. The structure that we were set up on until very recently was that last year, the tax credit was at 26%, and it was going to be stepping down to 22% this year, and then down to 10% next year. Well, the extension dictated that we are still at 26% in 2021, and we will still be at 26% until the end of 2022. And beyond that, it's been really well defined, better defined what it is to qualify for the federal tax credit. The requirement is that construction must have commenced before the end of the calendar year in order to qualify. So for those that just get their project underway by the end of next year, they should qualify for a 26% federal tax credit on the entire contract amount. After 2022, it will step down to 22% in 2023. And then in 2024, for residential installations, it will go away unless it gets extended again. No one expected to see an extension last year. So this is great news and takes a little bit of the pressure off and helps people to continue to go solar at a decent clip. And here's this kid again. Moving on. So looking at some of the financial comparisons and why solar electric systems make sense. Understand that this is kind of a general comparison that I drew up here based on someone that might have a $150 per month bill. And this is the sort of thing that we can look at for you if you do decide to look at a one-on-one consultation. We can break down your bills and help you to understand how going solar may benefit you. But really, talking about solar is the best part of my job because it really is like nothing but good news for practically everyone. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, it really does make sense for practically everyone. So looking at this together, you can see that over the course of 30 years, a bill that starts out at $150 per month in year one. This is based on a 6% annual increase, I should say, to PG&E's utility rates for electricity. Traditionally, those increases have been closer to 4 to 5% per year. However, last year they were 10%. And I think the consensus is that the rates will probably be going up a little bit more quickly following, all of the litigation and the bankruptcy proceedings through PG&E. So this uses a 6% annual increase. I should clarify on that. But again, year one, a bill that's at $150 per month. In year 15 is looking closer to about $340 per month. Year 30, that's up over $800 per month for the same amount of electricity used, for the same number of kilowatt hours used. So this is why going solar makes so much sense, because you can see this exponential rate increase over the course of X number of years, and that's what we really want to avoid. So $150 per month utility bill. If you were to lease, you would absolutely see savings on this bill. And you can see I popped this on here. Now this orange line is what we're looking at for the, I can use my laser pointer. This orange line here is what we're looking at for the cost of engaging in a lease to offset this usage. So obviously everything in between, this is your delta, a very good delta. You can see savings very clearly, and in the area of over $80,000 over the course of 30 years. Basically, what a lease does is allows you to lock in your electricity at a lower rate than you're paying the utility, with an expected escalation over the course of that time. So it's easy to plot out what your savings might be. Moving on to the next option, which is financing, you'll see this gray line here represents what it would cost to potentially finance a system like this over the course of 20 years. So if your starting cost for your electricity is $150, to lease, your starting cost per month would be probably around 100 and, I don't know, 2 or 3, maybe let's call that $105 per month. And if you're financing, you can see your starting cost for a 20-year term would be somewhere around like the $95 per month level. The benefit of financing is obviously that you can lock in your payments over the course of that term. Once you reach the end of that term, you own that system outright. And again, just like with the lease, everything between the gray line here and the blue line, your delta is all your savings. So very clearly, you can see the lease savings is somewhere in the $80,000 range, while the financing savings over the course of the same 30-year period is closer to $120,000. So very clearly, more savings for financing. You own the system outright, and you have your levelized costs that are expected. This is assuming that the solar electric system completely eliminates your electric bill, which it may not in some cases, just depending on sizing. And if you add load to your home, if you start doing more in your home than you were doing when you first built out the system, have a kid, get a hot tub, get an EV. These are all things that will add to your usage. So it's important to understand if you add usage, you will see a bill coming in too. But assuming that the system eliminates your usage, you will see some very clear savings over the course of that period. Of course, our last metric is the purchase option, which we can't really put those initial investment numbers on here because it would send a line way off the graph if you're talking about the purchase outright. However, the savings over the course of the lifespan of this system, you can see obviously is the cost of the solar electric system minus the financing charges here that you would see, and you'd be paying an interest for the financing option. So financing, you're looking again at about $120,000 savings over 30 years, and to purchase, you would be looking at closer to $130,000 savings over the course of 30 years. So in any case, if you can be avoiding financing charges and interest, you're going to be saving more. Now, with that said, as I mentioned, we do have a financing program through the county, which of course we can talk about if you're interested in looking at solar electric system for your home and look at what your financing options are, your purchasing options, so that can get a little bit more clear. Just to give you some clarity on our program, we do offer a 10 or a 20-year term with a 5.99% fixed interest rate. And the only upfront costs are basically the application fees, which come out to $178, I believe. This program, you're paying back those financing charges through your property tax bill. So it is a county program. They're county dollars. You're still, even in your financing, you're keeping your money local. And it's not based on income or credit to qualify for this program. It is based on equity that you have in the home. So we actually look at the value of the property versus what you still owe in principal. As I mentioned when we first started, we are looking at energy, water, solar improvements, and electric vehicle charging stations as an example of the sorts of things that we can finance. We did add seismic strengthening and wildfire safety improvements to the program just recently, and that is available to residents of all 9 city jurisdictions as well as unincorporated Sonoma County. And the reality is that we can actually finance for close to 120 different types of improvements. So that also covers windows and HVAC and insulation and all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in that, definitely give us a call. Concerning solar specifically, most people want to know how they will actually get started with going solar. So here's just a quick little guide. As I mentioned, electricity usage is really seasonal and production is really seasonal. So contractors generally want to see 1 year worth of usage in order to size out a solar electric system for you. So that's a good place to start. You can go on pge.com. If you've created an account based on your, your bill information, you can pull off your bill will allow you to create an online account. You can pull your usage down in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. It's really very helpful. Researching contractors. We have a ton of contractors in Sonoma County who have been doing this for a really long time. We have one of the highest adoption rates of solar per capita in the nation, and contractors that have been building these systems out for decades. So whether you are the person that wants to go with a really small local contractor that's been doing it for a really long time, or you're the person that wants to go with a really big national contractor because that makes you feel more secure, you have all kinds of options in Sonoma County. So really good news there. We always recommend, no matter what the work is, that you collect at least 3 bids for the work. That really helps to empower you as the customer, as the consumer. It can be a little overwhelming looking at bids, and especially if you just get one bid, you're never really sure if what you're looking at is decent pricing. So at least getting a couple of bids will allow you to compare and contrast what it is that you're looking at. And in order to the next bullet, comparing apples to apples, what you're looking at is the system size that your bid along with the contract price. That allows you to determine what the cost per watt is for any solar electric system that you're looking at. And that is how you can compare. At the end of the day, the system size that is bid to you is going to dictate how many kilowatt hours that system is going to produce, which is your main drive, the production of kilowatt hours. So you may get a bid from contractor A that is $10,000, and you may get a bid from contractor B that's $15,000. But it's a really different story if they have different system sizes or the same system size. So that's really important to take a look at. And if all of that was too confusing, we do have our consultation service, our bid review service. If you really want to get down to what it is that you're looking at and understand it a little bit better, we can always sit down and compare them, contrast them, and we could never point you in one direction or the other, but we could at least help to make it a little bit more clear what it is that you're looking at. So with all of that brings us to our Q&A portion. That is my presentation. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of it, and I'm sure there were probably a few people who've gone through this presentation more than once. And if that's the case, I apologize for the recycled jokes. But I think that at this point we can move on to any questions that we might have. Dora, are you there and able to go through any, and do we have any questions?
Hi. Yes, so I am here.
Great.
Well, we did have a couple of questions. One of them was, how do I know if I'm a Sonoma Clean Power customer? And I did actually respond to that on the chat, that you could see that on your PG&E bill, and
Great.
provided a resource on how to read that. That your PG&E bill, SEP has a really nice video that describes it.
Right.
But other than that, we had a comment from Anthony. He said to be sure to differentiate different battery chemistries. Lithium iron phosphate equals thermally stable and more environmentally friendly when recycling at the end of service life.
Yes.
And phase Sonnen, not Tesla. Okay, thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony.
And
yes,
then
it is
there's
true.
somebody else, if there.
Go ahead.
And then there's somebody else asking if Napa County has a similar program. Any idea?
Similar program to like the consultation services, or what type of program are we talking about? Is that clarified there?
It is not.
It is not. So
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 hopefully Diana can specify.
yeah, and I'll say that to my
They might be asking
knowledge,
like a division.
yeah, to my knowledge, the county of Napa does not have anything comparable to the energy and sustainability division. There are some of the same services that they have offered, such as the Green Business Program. I know that they, there are some partnership type things that they have done in the past with PG&E that we currently have some contracts on, that they would have been doing for their own for their locale. But in terms of like the consultation service and these workshops, I'm not certain, but I don't think so.
Okay. Another person asked that what is the difference in cost between a Bank of Marin battery and a Tesla?
Bank of Marin
I'm
battery
not sure
and
if that was a typo.
Tesla. Yeah. Batteries. I'll just jump off from there and talk about the cost of batteries in general. Um, as Anthony did point out, there are definitely different technologies out there. Some of the ancillary chemical makeup to those lithium-based batteries can dictate kind of the life expectancy of those batteries. Just as, if you cycle a battery, it's going to cut into the lifespan of the battery, kind of like our cell phones. The more you use it, the more you cycle it, the useful lifespan tends to drop off, and it has less capacity as time goes on. Some of those ancillary chemicals do dictate that it'll have a longer lifespan, which generally equates to a higher cost. So as Anthony pointed out, getting into name brand stuff, a Sonnen battery is one of those that does tend to have a longer lifespan, though it does tend to come at a higher price. As I mentioned, Tesla, we've seen those, and this is no. I should be clear that there are no endorsements here. Not talking about preference or what is better or worse, but clearly put Tesla. I think I mentioned, since we have our financing program and we do see these come through, we tend to see those coming in at a turnkey price of anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000. Whereas a Sonnen battery, which has close to the same actual storage capacity, but does show to be able to cycle many more times, actually has a warranty that is at 20 years instead of the Tesla warranty, which is at 10 years, but it does tend to be about twice as expensive. We've seen those come in turnkey anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 for a single Sonnen battery. So depending on the chemical makeup of the battery, there definitely are different price points and different life expectancies. There are not a lot of different batteries that we see on the market in our area that solar contractors are bidding right now. We have seen Tesla, LG, Sonnen, as mentioned, and Enphase are starting to come on the market as well. Those are the four that I've seen through our financing program. And yeah, the pricing does vary between them. So I hope that answers the
So
question.
I did read that wrong. It's Bank of Marine batteries.
Oh, I'm not familiar.
Just so you know. And Diana, okay. And Diana did say more of a financing program. So Skype, she was
Financing,
referring
sure.
to Skype,
Sure.
which there are various pace.
Yeah, there are various pace
Okay.
providers, and I'll just talk really quickly about costs to finance. As I mentioned, our program is at 5.99%, which is actually the best of the PACE programs that are available to you. And outside of that, I mean, Bank of Marin does have a solar specific loan, which I believe is still at 7% or 6.99%. So there are certainly other options out there. I would hate for anyone to come away from this thinking that their only financing option is through the County of Sonoma. It just is that we have, we do have one of those products, and it does tend to be quite competitive with the rest of the offerings in the county.
So you did talk a little bit about this, that someone asked if batteries are a good investment because their contractors told them they're not because of maintenance issues.
Hmm.
Tesla Powerwall in particular, is that true?
Um, I don't want to speak to that too much. It really does, as I kind of went into it a little bit, where people really expect batteries to start making a lot of sense as investments. Or, of course, there are arguments to be made about what those potential costs are when you have a power outage and you don't have battery backup, right? Like having to stay in a hotel or losing your freezer, losing your fridge, the contents of them, whatever the case may be. These are the costs that might be lost in the case of a power outage. The only other way that a battery could work as an investment is in that way that I was mentioning before, in terms of charging your battery effectively using off-peak electricity and using that battery during the peak time so that you're using off-peak electricity during the peak time of the day. Right now, the cost between peak and off-peak is pretty minimal. The cost difference for the standard time of use rate structure. However, if you're installing a battery, you do have the EV rate structure available to you, which the cost difference between off-peak and peak is quite a bit. There's a really big gap there. However, the EV rate structure doesn't necessarily work very well with a solar electric system because of the hours that net you the peak rates, or even the part peak rates. So this is definitely there. I should say. I think it's on February, and this is not great for a recorded workshop, but I think it's on February 9th. Sonoma Clean Power is actually hosting a workshop on some deeper battery basics, just on batteries alone. And that conversation of rate structures and how that all plays into batteries will be further explored. So that may be something to check out if you're interested in looking at that a little bit deeper.
Another person said they're considering upgrading an electrical panel. They have an old Cisco 100 amp. Are there any considerations they should have now in upgrading if they plan to add solar in the future?
I think the only consideration would be that if you upgrade that service panel alongside installing the solar, that the federal tax credit is available to you on it. So, if you need to upgrade that panel now because of something else that you're doing, I would say probably have a conversation with the solar contractor in terms of what they're going to need. But if you can do that alongside the solar electric system, it may benefit you financially.
Okay, another participant asked if they need to replace their shingle roof. Is the system easily removed once it's online?
I wouldn't say easily, but it is definitely doable. I mean, this is something that a lot of contractors are dealing with more often now, especially since solar has become more popular over the last X number of years. There are some people that are moving on to their second solar electric system, and so the removal of a solar electric system and putting up a new one is not super uncommon, nor is removing an existing solar electric system and replacing it, putting it back in the same spot after re-roofing takes place. It's a conversation that a lot of contractors, if they're coming out to your home and getting up on your roof and taking some measurements, they're probably going to be able to give you some sense of how long you have left in the life of that roof. And if you need to have the conversation of removal and replacement, you can have it at that time. I've definitely talked to a number of contractors who are, potentially willing to write something into a contract that allows for the removal and replacement within a certain window down the road. But yeah, it's definitely doable, and it's a conversation to have with your contractor.
Somebody asked if we have a list of reputable contractors, installers, and I just added into the chat a link to our Skype participating contractors.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then, does the tax credit only apply to purchase system versus financed or leased?
The tax credit applies to systems that are owned by you. If you lease the system, you do not own the tax credit. The tax credit would be owned by the company that owns the system. That is definitely an important clarification. But whether you purchase outright or finance, if you own the system, then you own the tax credit. Great question.
What is the typical cost of a system for someone with a $150 a month electric bill? Can you give a ballpark range of cost?
Yeah, I mean, so typical cost, it all depends on your own usage. And I should say that right off the bat. You know, the solar electric system that you're going to be building out on your home is catered to you and what you're seeing in your historical usage. With that said, the average system size in Sonoma County right now is between 5 and 6 kilowatts, probably, at least as far as what we're seeing come through our program. And when we break down the costs, we look at cost per watt. So if you have a 5 kilowatt system, you have 5,000 watts. So the average pricing in cost per watt that we're seeing does tend to land somewhere between like $3.50 to $4 per watt for a system installed. So if we went at the high end of that average of $4 per watt for a 5 kilowatt system, that would mean a $20,000 contract. That's not where it ends, though, because you do have that 26% federal tax credit, which equals out to about $5,000 in that case. So you would be looking at about $15,000 out of pocket if you were to purchase that average system size. So really, I can say, because everyone uses electricity differently, generally the solar electric systems that we're seeing come through right now, the out-of-pocket cost and the after-tax credit cost for most people is landing somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000. But again, it really depends on, you know, your usage and you know, the size system that you need, and then, you know, site-specific stuff. The more complicated your installation, the higher the cost of installation is going to be. So that's, you know, tile roofs, or if you need to do a lot of trenching, if you're building out a ground-mounted solar electric system, or if there's a really long wiring run, or if you want to have the wiring run through your attic space, or you need a service panel upgrade. You know, there are definitely things that change that cost per watt and can change it pretty drastically. But that's kind of what we're looking at for out-of-pocket cost. And it's also really important to consider that, as I mentioned earlier, if you're purchasing outright, you're probably looking at somewhere around a 6-year return on investment for a solar electric system that should be good for, you know, between 25 and 30 years. If you're financing, you're basically looking at shifting that cost in month 1 to where you're paying less in month 1 for financing the solar electric system than you would otherwise be paying for electricity. So just some things to keep in mind, that while the contract price obviously is important, how you're recognizing that as an investment is more important.
And that's it for questions. Arlie did say marine is a word for batteries used in boats. And I apologize for saying that incorrectly earlier.
Like marine,
you know.
marine boats, marine boats, marine batteries. Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Interesting. I'll put up our contact info.
But there are no more questions.
Great. Let me put up our contact info. Oh my gosh. So that people have that to reach out to us. If you do have questions, or if you're interested in setting up, you know, a consultation at any point, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can email us, or you can give us a call. We are all working remotely. I'm very clearly not in an office right now, but we're absolutely still holding these consultations, and we're all reachable at any time of the day, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you and help you out however we possibly can. Dora, thank you for helping me out with this presentation. And any last questions? Did anything else pop up?
There are some people who are not able to access the chat, maybe because they have an old version of Zoom.
Oh.
So all these links, can we email them out? Maybe, possibly. We can ask
Yes.
if these links can be emailed out.
Yeah, definitely. I know we'll be
That
sending
was the
out,
last thing.
I believe we'll be sending out the slide deck as well as a link to the recording of this presentation afterwards. Okay. Great. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate you attending, and keep an eye on our office to see what we have going in the future. There will be more workshops, and hopefully we can help you out. We'll leave the contact information